The job of a project manager is to deliver projects on time and on budget, but that doesn't always happen. In this episode, I have with me JC Hungerford, professional engineer and water division manager at Parametrics. He is an experienced project manager. He oversees 65 professionals that are focused on delivering projects. And in this episode, he's going to share with us several strategies and tips that he has used to successfully deliver his projects on time and on budget over and over and over. And these are very interesting strategies that he's just picked up and he's shared with his team over the years, and he's excited to share them with you. Let's jump right in. All right, now it's time for our PM conversation of the week, and I want to welcome on our guest for today, JC Hungerford, professional engineer, water division manager at Parametrics. JC, welcome to the Engineering Project Management Podcast.
Thanks, Anthony. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, definitely excited to have JC on board. At EMI, we did some work with Parametrics. We helped them to build kind of a flagship project management development program that we've been running for them, and it's gone very well. And today we're going to touch on some really important points in project management, some of which are in the program that we've been doing, but we're really happy to have JC with us. So JC, in your own words, tell us about your role as division manager. What is it that you do for Parametrics on a day-to-day basis?
So I manage our water divisions in both Oregon and Washington, and it's about 65 folks that I directly supervise. And then within Parametrics, we have over 100 folks that we collaborate on water related projects, so water, wastewater, and stormwater, and all phases of planning, engineering, and construction management for the projects. The company was founded on water solutions and water practice, water, wastewater treatment, collection, and conveyance, and we've certainly expanded on that over the last few years. And the company's making a huge investment in our water division currently, and looking to continue to grow not only in this region but the other regions of Parametrics.
That's great. That's exciting. And based on some of the numbers that you said there, JC, 65 people, 100 people across the company, and these are just internally. Obviously, when it comes to project management, you're dealing with a lot of external parties. And so, we can ask any experienced project manager, and they're all going to say the same thing, that communication is really the foundation of successful projects. But maybe in your own words, you can talk about kind of why communication is so important in project management.
First of all, to get buy-in from the team is really important, and help them be passionate about what they're doing. But miscommunication often leads to rework and certain elements of the project, whether it's scope creep or running out of budget. That's usually the starting point of where we see those projects go wrong, and things start to go south, is poor communication. And not whether it's not having regular check-ins with either your internal team at all levels, from entry-level engineers all the way up to your senior design leads, as well as with your client. It's really important to keep them as part of your decision matrix, and making sure that you're following up with the recommendations you're making to them, and then more importantly, conveying that back to the team in an efficient manner quickly. So if project decisions, design decisions are made, that the team's aware of that quickly.
That's great. And one thing that JC said there that's really important is with regard to scope creep being a point on a lot of projects where a project really does get off track. And if you're not familiar with what scope creep is, it's essentially when your project team or you as the project manager start working on things that are not included in the scope of work, which means you're not being paid to do. It's a very important topic in project management. In fact, in the Parametrics project management development program that we worked on, it's a big component of that program, because really you need to educate your project managers about scope creep. But the base of it, or the root of the problem, really is ineffective communication. If you're communicating properly with the clients, you're clear on expectations, you're both clear on the scope, and your team members are clear on the scope, then you can put a good fence around your project, like as we like to say. However, without that communication, you can't. And so, it is very critical on your project's communication. You got to keep it going through all parties. And I think as you kind of heard there from JC, it's with other parties. Like, that's what makes it so hard. It's not just your team internally. And that's why we got to really focus on things. So JC, you manage a very large team at various levels. How do you ensure effective project communication across the different team members? Are there tools or software that you use? How do you go about doing that?
Yeah, obviously with the pandemic, we've been offered new tools such as, virtual platforms, which have their strengths and weaknesses, to be direct. I think having a regular project check-in meetings with your entire team is really important, and not just senior leads, but making sure that everybody's invited and participating in those meetings. Um, from my experience, they may appear expensive on your budget, but in the end, all my projects that I've done that on, we've come in under, you know, within budget and completed the scope of work, and often ahead of schedule as well. Just because the team's working efficiently together and we're communicating as one. Through the pandemic, it's created the need for more diligent, manual check-ins through virtual platforms, because you can't walk down the hall and just check in with various engineers or designers that are working on the project. So it takes a little bit more effort. And now that we're coming back into a hybrid environment, I certainly welcome that opportunity to just go check in with folks on the team, because I've found during regular large check-in meetings, while there's certainly value to everybody being there, there's some folks that are just hesitant to speak up in those large format settings, and you can usually sense it in the meeting by reading body language, or just those folks that often bring up issues are a little more hesitant to share them. So for me personally, it's important to follow up with them shortly after the meeting and just check in and make sure there's nothing that's in the back of their mind that they want to bring up, that I can bring up with various members of the team following up with those formal meetings.
That's great. And I really like the point that JC that you make about some people I know resist meetings because, to your point, you're taking a lot of people that are billable professionals, you're putting them together at one time, and theoretically they're not working on their project at that time. But in all reality, if you're getting everybody on the same page and making sure that people are communicating effectively, like you said, you're probably going to come out on top on your projects more times than not than if you didn't get people together. And that kind of goes back to what I talked about a little bit earlier with the scope creep issue. Is if you're not including some of your team members in these meetings, they may not be really clear on what's expected of them and what they should and shouldn't be doing. So if the client happens to reach out to them directly and ask them for something and they weren't in the meeting with you, all of a sudden, like, yeah, they want to service the client, which is really what they're taught most likely as a consultant. So they're going to jump on it, not knowing that they're doing something that they're not getting paid for. So I think, JC's advice there, that it's really more valuable to have people together than not. I agree with. I think meetings can be very high leverage if you have the right people in the meetings and you're running them effectively. And I think the other thing that JC said that I just want to reinforce is the idea that people sometimes are more comfortable in smaller settings. I think that's really important. I know, in fact, from the development program that we built with Parametrics, we have some breakout sessions in the trainings, and then we come back together as a larger group. And it seems that when people come back together, they have some things to debrief because they were in a smaller group and they could get things going. So I think as a project manager, you need to make sure that your people are comfortable coming to you and asking questions, asking other people questions, kind of promoting that openness atmosphere, because without that, JC, they may not ask you the right questions that they need to ask you.
Absolutely. Some folks feel more comfortable speaking up through a lead of the group, and so having those breakout groups and having one person speak up on others' behalf can sometimes be beneficial as well.
So you talked about, obviously we've been dealing with a lot of remote work the last few years, with COVID. You're talking maybe getting back to hybrid. I know some firms are, which is great. Regardless of all of that, there's going to be remote opportunities. There's going to be hybrid work. How do you continue to kind of motivate and engage your team in this landscape of, various modes of work?
It's certainly challenging, and it's dynamic. It's always changing. I think everybody, um, no two employee owners of Parametrics are working in the same situation, and it's just creating various opportunities for folks to get together, whether it's virtual get-togethers, hybrid get-togethers, or in person. We have a fair amount of folks that come in the office on a regular basis. I make a point of being here as a division manager, just to be here as a mentor, opportunity for staff that needs to chat with me, whether project related or operations related. But continuing to find project work and align people with work they're passionate about is one thing that I think is really important to keep people motivated on the work they're doing, because as we all know, there's tremendous amount of burnout going on right now as folks are working in isolated environments. And if we're not enjoying what we're doing, it's just going to lead to that burnout and feeling of isolation.
And to that point, JC, how often are you meeting with your teams in person, virtually? How does that look for you right now?
So I have formal division meetings about once a month, and more often as needed. And then informally, I'm checking in with folks, whether they're direct reports or indirect reports. I'd say on average every 1 to 2 weeks, some more frequently as requested. I like to make myself available as needed.
That's great. And I like what you said before about, you coming to the office, so you're there to provide some mentorship and some guidance for people. I think that's really important. I mean, I definitely agree that we can complete projects remotely. There's no doubt about that. There's tons of tools and tech out there today. I think what you miss sometimes is the mentoring and the guidance, like you mentioned, where someone could just walk up to you, knock on your door. Hey, JC, I got a question about this client or this project, or how should I be doing this extra work order? I want to make sure I do it the right way, or something like that. And I do kind of feel that some of those instances are missed unless, like you said, the project manager or the leader of the group is extremely intentional about, constantly making sure that those things are happening, which you always want to be. But, when you're managing a lot of projects and a lot of people, sometimes that falls a little bit, falls through the cracks, or something you may miss, or you may not get to engage with someone for a couple of weeks. So I really like the idea of, as a project manager, as a leader, trying to get in the office, trying to make yourself available for mentoring, even if it is remote. Some of you may have limitations.
Yeah.
In office hours or something like that, you could do with your team just to make yourself available.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you mentioned, it's often that myself or other project managers, senior consultants at Parametrics will get a call from a client asking a question. And I think when we're in the office, it's real easy to walk out and talk with other folks and, maybe bring some of our junior engineering engineers into helping solve that problem versus just, well, I'm home and I'm isolated, I'm going to do it myself, because of that intentional effort. All that being said, it's really important as a project manager or someone with operational responsibilities to go through that additional effort. And it may extend your day a little bit, but it's how we build our teams and how we facilitate career growth with some of our folks as well.
That's great. And so, JC, having visibility of how project tasks link together and how they're impacted by, customer dependencies can be really helpful in terms of project management. What are some of the things Parametrics does to improve project visibility?
So, first of all, we are all employee owners at Parametrics, so we're very transparent on our financials, whether it be company financials or project financials. And so it's really important that we start off, with once the scope, schedule, and budget is negotiated, that you share that with the entire team and share with folks what their role on the project, what tasks are going to be important, or, what they're going to be. Which tasks they're going to be delivering and responsible for, as well as how much budget has been allocated to them as individuals. And I even take that a step further when I'm developing my scope and budget. I like to involve those folks to make sure they feel they have enough time. Obviously, sometimes in negotiations, things get skinny down and we have to cut scope as a result of that. But evolving those folks from the project development into the project kickoff meeting is really important. And then one thing I do on all my projects, encourage all project managers to do, is to maintain a issues list, both internal to our design team as well as external with our client, and meet with our client on a regular basis and tie those decisions that are made back into our internal design decisions log. And we review that at every single design meeting just to make sure the ones that are outstanding, who's on point, who's supporting that individual, what the time frame for getting that completed, and then we color code it as they're being addressed, and also assess a criticality with decision making on how critical that decision is and how it's going to affect either our scope or schedule on the project.
Wow, that's great. So basically, this issues list is something that they develop, and then like, let's say you have a project meeting, you get together, you're reviewing those lists, I guess.
Yeah, so my larger projects, I meet with my internal team every week and we go through that issues list and um, any of the outstanding issues, talk about it. What are some of the challenges with closing out that issue? And they may be external issues and it may fall on me on a project manager to then meet with my client and their internal project team and make a recommendation to them, and then the client ultimately makes the decision. In the end, it's the client's project. We are here to help them achieve their goals. So it's really important that they're the ones making the decisions and we're making recommendations to them.
That's great. I like that a lot because I think also as a team member, if you have a list like that, you know you're going to be able to check it with your project manager, go through it with a mentor or someone, a leader on a regular basis. Again, it promotes the idea of openness. Let's talk about the issues. Let's go through them together. Let's attack them together. And I think those are the kind of things that can help people as they grow and become future project managers.
Yeah, and so usually I try to have my um, check-ins with a client later in a week and then follow up early in the week with my design team, so there's not a lag in that turnaround. So for example, right now, treatment plant upgrade project, I meet with the client on Fridays and then Monday we have our team meetings.
Mm,
So there's not an opportunity for the team, say a critical decision is made on Friday and we import that into our decisions list. There's not an opportunity for a task or a team within the project to continue down
mm.
the incorrect path and spend unnecessary effort on something that may have changed recently on the project.
That's great. So as soon as you get it from the client, you're able to go right back to your team and voice it to
Exactly.
them. So there's no miscommunications or missteps in a way. That's awesome. So speaking about client communication, um, it's something I know Parametrics is really focused on. In fact, in the training that we developed, we really drove home client communication really breeds client satisfaction, of course. That being said, client communication is very complex. The bigger the project, the more layers of decision making that you kind of have to wade through. So, you have to figure out what, when, how, and how much every stakeholder should really know. And that's something that can get pretty messy pretty quickly. So, what are some of the tools that you use to assist with communication with different clients?
Well, I think meetings are incredibly important, and then obviously emails, and whether it be even down to text message or virtual meetings. um, First and foremost, for me and my experience, it's imperative to understand who at within your client is responsible for making decisions, because often it's like you mentioned, you get a lot of stakeholders at the table and you want to be responsive to your client and you think that's an important person and they may have decision authority but they may not, and so they're asking you to do something on a project that um, may be out of scope, but oh well, they're responsible, so I think we should do that. Establishing that decision making matrix
Mhm.
with a project and with your client is really important. um, and then often having regular and often check-ins with your client is important. I like to do it in person as much as possible, and obviously limitations with the pandemic having to do virtually. But um, just sit down, work through that issues list, similar color coding with those issues that we do with our internal. How critical are they, and is it resulting in scope creep? And all projects, as a project manager, I think just about every project you're going to have one or two or sometimes multiple difficult conversations with a client, whether it be need additional budget or um, some sort of unforeseen hurdle that comes up. But it's important to have that communication early in a project, and I think we all know not all projects are going to go perfect, and I don't think our
Mhm.
clients expect that either. But surprising them at the end or the second half of the project has never resulted in a positive outcome for me personally, versus like the minute or within within reason that we discover an issue, educate ourselves on it, and then go have that conversation with the client. They're going to be accepting of it and understanding and work through it with a much more positive outcome in my experience.
For sure. Yeah. Typically, I would say clients don't like surprises just
No,
because
nobody does.
in the line of work that we do, the surprises usually aren't going to be great. I mean, maybe
Right.
once off, hey, we saved you some money, we found an alternative. Those things happen, but usually it's, something's late, we got a supply chain issue, something's going on. And so I think, like you said, constant communication throughout the project allows you to not only inform them, but I think also, JC, you build relationships with your clients because you're going to be with them for years, hopefully.
Yeah, and I was just gonna say, building that relationship of trust, and sometimes obviously the ideal relationship becomes that personal relationship where you become friends with the folks you're working with, and you're really enjoying the work. That's the work that causes us all here to show up every day. We start developing those personal relationships with our clients, and it's fun to work with them. And at the end of the day, we all realize we have a job to get done and we're all working towards the same goals. I always say to my clients, it's our responsibility to achieve your goals through this project, and outline those goals early in the project and work towards those. And we're all working for the same thing at the end of the day.
Yeah, for sure. That's great. And I think if you build relationships with your clients and you're honest with them, even if it is a bad surprise, they know, like you just said, that you're on their team, you have a good relationship with them. Your only focus is to make sure that the project is successful. And I feel like then they understand, okay, it's bad news, but it happens on a project. I know, JC is looking out for me. So it's time to just keep moving on, as opposed to them, like, not being as understanding.
Yeah, and it's incredibly important also to, if you identify an issue, obviously you need to work on coming to the table with a solution, and just not go dump it back on your client and say, "We discovered this issue. We're not really sure what to do. Sorry." Spend some time within reason to come up with some alternatives and some solutions for them to consider.
That's great. So you mentioned earlier on that, you really pride yourself on delivering projects on time and on budget. And you mentioned how meetings are a real effective way that help you to do that. Are there any other tips or strategies that you take that you can mention that you feel have been very helpful to you in delivering your projects on time and on budget?
Um, well, first of all, I think it's really important to um, go through the effort it takes to develop a concrete scope, schedule, and budget upfront with your client, and have that communication. I think sometimes we rush to get the project under contract, and then the schedule might not be clear or realistic, or you know we may just have a loose scope, and then there's lots of opportunity for scope creep, which may result in a project overrun. So going through that effort up front to develop the project and the communication protocols with your client are really important, and make sure you're agreeing to a realistic schedule to begin with. And if the schedule is unrealistic, talk with your client about ways that whether it be, maybe we can't deliver the full project, but here's some ideas of meeting this deadline you're trying to achieve, or alternate project delivery methods, things like that. Come to them with additional solutions, and just you know th- they're more times than not going to be receptive to that open and honest communication, and build that trust and that communication conduit throughout the project.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that because I do think sometimes as consultants or in the consulting world, you think of the consultant client relationship as a little bit of a good bad thing, whereas we don't think about it on this being on the same team. And everything you've suggested today is, hey, we're on the same team, we're both trying to execute this project. And I think that hopefully, for those of you that are maybe younger PMs or soon to be PMs and you've heard a lot of that, you can try to shift your mindset a little bit, because your client is your partner and you got to work together to get jobs done. Otherwise, it's going to be a rough ride for you as a project manager.
It's going to be really tough. I think those of us that have managed a lot of projects, we can point to those ones where it was that, like you said, client, uh, consultant sort of adversarial relationship. Those ones that we're all working together and working together to achieve the same goal. Everybody's having fun. We're showing up. We're having a good time, and at the same time maintaining a professional relationship and working hard together to get the project done.
All right. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to come back with JC and we're going to cover what he sees as the biggest project management pitfall. We'll be right back. All right, we are back with JC Hungerford, professional engineer, water division manager at Parametrics. All right, JC, you gave us a lot of good info so far throughout this episode. However, I've got one last question for you. Over your time as a project manager, what have you seen as the biggest project management pitfall, and how would you recommend that a project manager overcome it or avoid it? Can you share something with us?
Sure. I think it's similar to the theme of what we've been talking about here, but starting off with clear communication of roles and responsibilities of a project, both internal to your project team and external with your client. Agreeing on a concrete scope, schedule, and budget is incredibly important. Communicating that with your team, and then maintaining that communication throughout the duration of the project. I think sometimes what I've seen happen is budget's getting tight, so the first thing to be cut off is check-in meetings, and we cut them off altogether, and then assume that communication and the maintenance of the issues list is going on. And then we have pods of, especially multidiscipline projects, where you have tasks and task leads working on different tasks, and they may not be coordinating because they're not provided that opportunity to come together. And I've seen projects go south, and go south quickly, when that regular communication and the complete project team check-in starts to fall off. So even though on your project budget statement, it may look important or expensive, because you have 15 people in a room, maybe shorten them to 15 minutes and follow up with individuals if it's becoming an issue. But there's so much value and so much actual design work that happens in that opportunity to meet when you bring the folks together. And one discipline may bring up a concern that affects another discipline, and without that opportunity to talk together, you're blind to that until you go through QC, and it's like, well, this system isn't going to work with that system, electrical, mechanical, something, for example. And so now we have a tremendous amount of rework to fix it.
Yeah, so a couple of really good points there. Set your roles and responsibilities for your team at the beginning of the project. JC mentioned earlier, like a kickoff meeting, maybe doing it through that, making sure everyone's on the same page, and then continue to keep the communication lines open, even between different disciplines and departments throughout the project. Sometimes you can squeeze those meetings, cut them out. Hey, we're good enough. We don't need them right now. We could skip a couple. And one, division's not talking to another one. It's a very big issue, especially on multidiscipline projects, which a lot of you I know work on. There's overlap and things can happen between parties, and they need to keep talking through them. So once again, we want to thank JC for coming on. We really enjoyed working with everyone at Parametrics on developing their project management development program. And really, it's important. Training is important in general. If you're a young PM out there, you're looking to get your skills updated, ask your company if they have some kind of training program. It's a really important thing to do. I know a lot of consulting engineers, professionals get thrown into project management. They just kind of get thrown into it. Either, somebody, project manager left, or it just became time, and it's kind of like trial by fire. And I do think you can learn a lot on the job, but learning on the job while having support from your firm is even better. So again, it was a pleasure working with everyone at Parametrics. If you want to check out Parametrics, you could check out their website at parametrics.com. They got a careers page with a lot of great opportunities right now. And JC, once again, thanks so much for coming on the podcast today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Anthony. I really appreciate it, and enjoyed the opportunity to talk with you.
I hope you enjoyed my conversation with JC today. We talked about a lot of different things. Obviously, delivering projects on time and on budget was one of the key components of our conversation, but also the client communication, right? Having that back and forth with your clients is so critical as a project manager, because as JC said, you're delivering their projects. So you need to really meet their expectations, and communication helps you to be able to do that. I hope you enjoyed this episode. We put out videos like this on a weekly basis to help engineering professionals become better managers and leaders. Please consider subscribing to our channel here so we can help you engineer your own success. I'll see you next week.